Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll try that again. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Well. So we are going to do a topic that, unfortunately, as I like to say, is probably the least studied area in Jewish life. Because for some reason people think that Judaism has nothing to say on healthy eating, exercise, good sleep, and general physical health. Not something you really learn about in many classes or in yeshiva. However, we're going to look at a number of Jewish sources. Primarily, we're going to look at one writer's information, one great Jewish thinker, I shouldn't say writer, a great rabbi who was known as the Rambam, Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. He was, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, and he was a doctor, actually in Egypt, to the Sultan of Egypt. Actually, does anyone know what particular position he held as a holy rabbi and doctor? He was in charge of the harem of the Sultan, because the Rambam was the only person that he trusted, this Sultan, of all of his many wives and concubines. He was such a holy Jew that he felt very comfortable that this was going to be the best person who was going to take care of, which he did very faithfully for a long time. So he studied Torah, and then he practiced medicine, and then he studied Torah, and he wrote a vast amount, which is epic. Actually, he writes that he was so tired at the end of the day when he'd finish being a doctor that they'd have to take him and they'd kind of flop him over his donkey or his horse, whatever he rode. And the donkey would know his own way home, and they would kind of like schlep him back home. His writing, his actual ketav yad, his actual writing, his own written word, is actually can be seen. There are genizot in Oxford, I think in Cambridge, where you can actually see the writings of the Rambam. So, it's very much alive. He wrote a book called the Mishnah Torah, which really literally means a repetition of the Torah. And in that book, he gives you the laws of everything in Judaism. We've discussed this book a lot, because when you study anything in Judaism, you've got to visit the Mishnah Torah. You want to study the laws of Yom Kippur, Mishnah Torah. Tzedakah, Mishnah Torah. Everything in Judaism. Actually, he's the only person in Jewish history who actually made halakha for everything in Jewish law. Right? The entire gamut. Many great rabbis would take sections and make halakha. He did it all. In this book, at the very beginning actually, he talks about, in Hilchot Deyot, he talks about the laws of physical health. And he says, I'm going to tell you why I'm going to discuss physical health. Not just because I'm a doctor, but also because it is impossible, says the Rambam, to know God, to have a relationship with Hashem, unless you take care of your body. So this is not going to be a class on the laws of kashrut, which is elsewhere. This is talking about eating the right foods in the right way, in the right order. Talking about when to sleep and how to sleep. When to go to the bathroom and how often. There's a lot actually in his writings about that alone. When to exercise, how to exercise. Actually, what even defines exercise comes from the Rambam himself. So, these weeks that I've been speaking over the summer, the ones that I've done, I try to find something from the headlines people are talking about. Well, this topic is in the news like every day. Because, as we know, there is a heart disease epidemic. There is an obesity disease epidemic. And I found just a recent statistic on this from the National Obesity Trends from the CDC. About 1/3 of US adults are obese. 33%. It's a lot, right? I don't know if that's true. I was just in Europe. I tell you something, I didn't see that many obese people in Europe. I just didn't. You go to the supermarkets in America, and some people are just making it, through the aisles. And you go to Europe, And they're eating foods. They're eating pastas and croissants and all that. I'm telling you, I didn't see the obesity that you see here. Approximately 70% of children and adolescents from the ages of 2 to 19 are obese. Right? So this is like an epidemic, really, and that many people. 20 years and over, 33% we said. 20 years and over, overweight and not obese is 35%. Add those together and you got, pretty much, everyone in the country. And percent of children aged 2 to 5-year-olds. You've seen those videos. They're very cute, but they bounce and it's not healthy. 10%. 10%. And they're not really making their own, eating choices at that age. Here's a funny one. I just found this as well. Obesity in dogs in America ranges from 23 to 41%. Even our dogs are fat. All right? Have you seen dogs on the treadmill? Those are funny videos. I shouldn't really mention that publicly. This is a problem, And by the way, there's a higher incidence of obese dogs if their owners are obese. That makes sense, right? Because what are they feeding them? From their own table, and that's probably garbage as well. Okay? So where does the Rambam get his information from? Where is he getting all these laws that I'm going to go through in quite some detail? There's a lot more, by the way. I have a number of the books of the Rambam that discuss this. It's not just in the Mishnah Torah. He has a number of books that were translated. But where is he getting it from? Well, what is the makor of this? Is he making it up? So he says, well, we're not too sure because he didn't tell us this. But some comes from the Gemara, but a lot comes from his own observations. And we're talking about 1,000 or so years ago. And when I read through this, it's like you're reading something out of a news journal today. So there is a pasuk in the Torah, in Devarim, where we're reading from now. V'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshotechem. You have to go beyond the basics in terms of taking care of your health. Ma'od, says the Torah. You have to be very, very careful of your physical health. And by the way, that pasuk comes for a number of things. It means you can't just walk into oncoming traffic, right, and say, well, God will protect me. If this is not my time, I won't die. That's stupid. You're going to get hit, okay? You're not allowed to walk on a roof without a fence. Actually, if you build a roof that is a flat roof or a stairs, you must put up a marker. You have to put up a guardrail. That's for you and for other people. Okay? All of this, say the rabbis, is guidance from the Torah that you must take care of your health. Okay? There's many stories which I grew up with. When I grew up, they knew smoking was bad, right? But everyone smoked. I mean, my mother, who should live and be well, she was in the Israeli army, and everyone smoked in the army, back, I won't tell you what year, but, many years ago. And it was and she just kept on smoking after. She became addicted to cigarettes until in her 50s, I think she had hypnosis and it went away. She started taking the gum, for 10 years in and of itself. Now, the box itself tells you, but it wasn't so apparent. So there's many stories of great Torah leaders who back in the 40s, 50s used to smoke because they didn't know how bad it was. It used to be that a doctor would check you out in a surgery while smoking. And it sounds insane to us, but that's just the way it was. It was just an accepted thing. Problem was, once the doctor said that this is going to affect your life and your health, terrible, by the way, smoking, and Dr. David can verify this, if you ask any doctor, is the worst thing you do to your body. It's like the worst is smoking. And I'm going to talk about vaping as well. Once they found out it was bad for you, many great Torah leaders had to literally just stop cold turkey, because once it was shown it was bad for your body, you got to stop. Because there's a pasuk. And once they knew that smoking was bad, which they found out later, they had to stop. Many years ago, I think I've told the story before, but it's a pretty crazy story. I had a certain heart. I thought it was hereditary. It wasn't. But I went to have my heart checked out. And they gave you a sonogram of the heart. What's it called? They gave you thank you so much, echocardiogram. So I went to this doctor, and he's considered one of the great doctors in Manhattan. Back then, my assurance went that far. And he's checking me out. I won't give you his name. You'll see why in a second. And while he's checking me out, I was like, can I smell smoke? And this cardiologist says to me, yeah, I smoke. And I was like, you smoke? But you see this. You're a doctor. How can you be smoking? I don't get it. Like, you know. And he said to me, I started a medical school, and I was never really able to fully give it up. It's like, Emily, you know doctors that smoke? I know many smart people that smoke. It's incredible. I know actually many doctors who schmef as well. They use the e-cigarette, which I have a lot to say on, but we're going to leave that aside, because I don't want to get attacked. Okay, so that's why Rashi tells us on this pasuk, I am Hashem, your healer. Like a physician says to a person, don't eat this thing unless it brings you to danger or illness. Therefore, Hashem gave us the requirement to find doctors to take care of us and to heal us. That's why you're allowed to say, I need to go to a doctor. And like, well, God's the ultimate healer. He is. But God endowed us with the ability to heal each other. And that's why it's a mitzvah to go to a doctor if you're sick, or more importantly, to become a doctor if you have a Jewish mother. So all that is very, very important. Okay? All right. So I'm going to need my notes today. Okay? So the Rambam he doesn't say this in the laws of the Mishnah Torah, but he mentions it elsewhere in one of his other Sfarim, that we look at the person as a whole holistically. We don't just always treat the illness. We try to get to know the person and try to heal them. And he says if a patient can be managed with the management of nourishment alone, he believes that food is health, which now we know. But this was not so obvious going back, He says the first important call for being a healthy person is what you eat, he says. And therefore, the first thing a doctor should do before they give you medication is to check your diet. Right? Which may sound obvious to you now, but going back 10, 15, 20, 30 years, it wasn't. And a person should never be treated alone with medication. If a physician cannot manage without medication, he says, then you start with very mild ones before resorting to stronger ones. And that's something the Rambam consistently goes through. You've got to start with weaker medications and then get to healthy. But you've always got to look at diet and bowel movement. He's very into that, okay? Then he says in the laws of Hilchot Deot, which we spoke about, the body being healthy is one of the ways of God. It's impossible to understand or know the knowledge of your Creator while you're unwell. If you're sick, you're thinking, yeah, God made me sick, I've got to feel it. He's like, no. Your relationship to Hashem, your relationship to God is going to be negatively impacted if you are sick all the time. Therefore, you must, says the Rambam, find a healing for your sickness. Therefore, stay away from things that destroy your body, like smoking, and accustom yourself to healthy and curing matters. Okay? And then he gives his general klal, and this is pretty much the most important part of all the Rambam's writings when it comes to physical health. And it is, one should never eat unless they are hungry, don't drink unless you are thirsty, and do not hold yourself back for even a single moment from going to the bathroom. He's like, that is actually, it's asur to do that. There's other pesukim in the Torah that talk about that. The person shouldn't hold back going to the bathroom, especially to defecate. But he says that is going to be the worst thing that you can do. Whenever you feel the need to go to the bathroom, you need to go and do that immediately. And he's actually going to call overeating poison for the body. The worst thing you can do. He actually says you can get away with eating unhealthy foods if you eat less of them. Better to eat less of unhealthy foods than overeating, even on relatively healthy foods. That's the Rambam's derech. Overeating, he calls, is a tzama mavet, is a poison to your guf, to your body. And he bases this, as do others, upon a verse of King Solomon. King Solomon in the book of Mishlei tells us, chapter 21, verse 23, if you're interested, Shemor piv ulashono, you should guard your mouth and your tongue. Shomer mitzvot nafsho, if you do that, you're going to save your soul. Why are you guarding your mouth and your tongue? So he says this double expression of mouth and tongue is actually because your mouth is a two-way street. When you talk, you have to watch what you say, because you could speak lashon hara, and that's going to affect your nefesh terribly if you speak bad gossip and lashon hara. However, he also says your mouth represents what you eat, and you have to watch what you put inside your mouth as well. Because if you eat the wrong foods, and he's not just talking about kosher, he's talking about unhealthy foods as well, it's also going to negatively impact your soul, your neshama. As we said, the Rambam says, if you don't take care of what you eat, take care of your body, you're going to have a fractured relationship with Hashem, with God. Therefore, you have to watch both ways. Someone was pointed out to me, if the Rambam were to walk into a kosher supermarket today, and the Rambam would see the amount of foods, that are on the shelves that are unhealthy, he would be like, yes, they're kosher, but they are asur to eat. Forbidden to eat. By the way, I'm not even kidding you. My wife just called. My wife and I are very into healthy eating, and we got rid of a lot of foods that we, used to have in the house. We got rid of as kids. We used to feed our kids a lot of garbage, and we changed a lot of the foods in the house for a number of reasons, not for now. But she actually turned around to me. On Shabbat, we only eat organic, healthy spelt breads now. We moved away from as much wheat as possible. Why? You can see me later. I'll tell you why. But she actually said to me that, a lot of the wraps and other things and the whole wheats we have in the house, they have a lot of preservatives in them, which preserve the bread but are not good for your body. You really have to watch what you eat. When you do that, you're doing a mitzvah, right? You need to research. You need to understand. My point is, just because it's kosher doesn't mean it's healthy. There are many non-Jewish people who eat non-kosher foods that are very healthy, and many Jews who eat, kosher foods that are, with all due respect, very, very unhealthy. The Gemara says that on Shabbat, you are allowed to overeat. Eat more than you normally would. Everyone knows this. There's a famous myth. It's a myth, that if you eat on Shabbat, you don't put weight on Shabbat. This is complete and utter drivel. Anyone who's stood on a scale, Motzei Shabbat, knows it's nonsense. That's not it. The Gemara tells us, and Rashi tells us, that Hashem gives us an ability to eat and enjoy more food on Shabbat. Now, it used to be that, going back not even that long ago, Shabbat was the only day people would have a decent meal. Like what you eat on a Tuesday night, on a regular, even a not expensive restaurant, is what your ancestors would eat as their best meal on Shabbat. And not even every Shabbat. They couldn't afford every Shabbat. Okay, so the foods we eat on Shabbat are meant to be better than we normally eat. But unfortunately, things have become, disproportionate. And therefore, the Vilna Gaon says that even the amazing and extra foods that you eat on Shabbat to feed your neshama yetera, the extra soul you're given, and you should eat better foods. Actually, the Gemara says that a person should walk around on Monday, see a nice piece of meat, and say, I'm going to buy this lichvot Shabbat Kodesh, in honor of Shabbat. And then on Tuesday, to see a better piece of meat, say, this one's for Shabbat, and yesterday's I'll eat now. So we do that. We do put our better foods aside. That doesn't mean you can be or should be a glutton on Shabbat. The Vilna Gaon says, the Yetzer Hara comes to us on Shabbat and says, eat whatever you want, as much as you want. When you're younger, you can. When you get older, you still got to be careful. It's not an excuse to be a glutton, but you should have better foods even on Shabbat. It is acceptable, understandable. You can eat more than normal, and that's definitely okay. So, says the Rambam, overeating is poison. I'm going to read the words in the Hebrew. V'achila gasa. Achila gasa is overeat. By the way, if those words sound familiar to you, achila gasa literally means overeating, but it means eating in a disgusting way. On Yom Kippur, we actually do teshuvah for achila gasa. You'll see it in the list of, I think, 44 sins that we do. Achila gasa is one of them. Okay, so we know that overeating is going to be a problem, and he says that he calls it sam hamavet. It's a very strong language of the Rambam to describe eating bad foods. V'hu ikar l'chol chalam. He says it's the root of all sickness, says the Rambam. We're reading the Rambam. The root of all sickness is overeating. Okay? Most illnesses are caused by bad foods and overeating, even if you overeat good foods, he says. Afilu mimachalim tovim. eat good foods, don't overdo it. You can get away with bad foods, which he describes as bread that is dipped and cooked in honey, I guess what you would call a donut. You get away with it once in a while. Just don't make that your ikar main foods that you're going to eat. Okay? Now the Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, okay, so we looked at the Rambam, none of the Ramban, who's a Kabbalist. He does not give us rules for eating like the Rambam does. He wasn't a doctor. But he does say that a person, and this is a very famous statement of the Ramban Nachmanides, in the Parsha of Kedoshim, to be holy. And he says that if a person wants to be a holy person, how do they do that? Well, Rashi says, to be holy, you've got to stay away from things that are forbidden. Which makes sense. You want to be a holy Jew, stay away from forbidden things, people, whatever. The Ramban says no. Staying away from sin doesn't make you holy, it makes you Jewish. That's Rashi's definition. He says, no, that doesn't work for me, says the Ramban. The way to be holy, says the Ramban, is to stay away from things that are permitted. What does that mean? How do you say? To moderate your foods and drinks and behaviors. When you moderate your physical desires, whatever those desires are, he says that's how you become holy. So we have a very famous machloket between Rashi and the Ramban. Rashi says you become holy by staying away from things that are forbidden, and the Ramban says you become holy by staying away from things that are permitted. And he says that it is possible for a person, this is the statement that he makes, it is possible for a person to be a naval b'reshut Torah. It is possible, says the Ramban, for a person to be a disgusting person, a naval, b'reshut, with the permission of the Torah. How can you become a disgusting person with the permission of the Torah? He says by overeating and overdrinking. When you do that, the Torah permits it because the food is kosher and the wine is kosher and you're making all the brachot and the pizza you're eating was made by a holy Jewish woman, right? And the wine was made by a holy Jewish man and had all the great intentions and you make all the right brachot, but you're still a disgusting person because you're overeating and not moderating your physical desires, as the Ramban. It is true. You are following halakha, you're following the Torah, but you are being a naval, b'reshut Torah. You're being a disgusting person because you're overeating and not moderating your physical desires. So the Ramban says, even the Ramban, who wasn't a doctor, but even he says, when you moderate what you eat, you are on your path to becoming a holy person. It's a very famous treatise of the Ramban. Okay? All right. Let's talk a little bit about exercise, that thing that everyone loves to hate. And the Rambam actually defines exercise, you know? I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes you go to the gym, and there's some people that's like, you know, some guy up there with his little earbuds in, and he's going 1 mile an hour on the treadmill, you know? Or, you know, there's always one Jewish guy standing at the reception with a towel around his neck thinking he's exercising. He's exercising his mouth. He's not doing exercise. This is not exercise. There needs to be, says the Rambam, a strong or weak movement that is vigorous. Now I hear that a strong movement that is vigorous is exercise, but what is a weak movement that is exercise? It's a great question. I think I have an answer. My father-in-law should live and be well, and my mother-in-law just moved down to Florida. We went to visit them recently, and he took up something called Tai Chi, right? And yoga. And you see these people are doing very slow movements, but this is real exercise. I mean, they're getting on a schwitz. I would call that a weak movement. It's not a weak exercise that increases your heart rate. And that's how the Rambam defines it. And as a result, he says your breathing begins to increase, and it's not proper to do physical exercise except on an empty stomach. That's actually what the Rambam says. It's interesting. I mean, there are doctors who disagree with that, but many agree. And you must go to the bathroom. Actually, you need to check your bowels at least 10 times a day. I mean, as Jews, that's not much for you people, right? I mean, we're like, at least 30 times a day we're going. At least 10 times a day. Rise, you wake up, before and after you exercise, before and after you pray, and many times during the day, you need to check how you're doing. Yeah? The best time for exercise is in the morning, he says, when a person awakens from their sleep after a visit to the bathroom. That's what the Rambam says. Okay? Again, this is not halakha. Okay? You don't have to, this is not like, putting tefillin on, or praying. But this is the advice of the Rambam. He says, before you eat, says the Rambam, before you eat, you should take a walk or do some physical work or do some exercise to warm up your body. Basically, I think the analogy given in the Gemara is just like you wouldn't put food into an oven that's not on, you want to get the oven going and then put the food in the oven or on the fire that's already on, right? He says you want to get things going beforehand, okay? He says basically do physical labor in the morning, working up a sweat, take a break, cooling off, and eat after that, taking a warm bath after strenuous activity is recommended, and then you should eat. Another rule of health, and this is in Hilchot Deah by the same book that talks about the laws of Shemitah, laws of Pesach, right? This is the same book, so the Rambam wasn't messing around. Another rule of health is that as long as a person exercises vigorously, does not eat their fill, okay, and I'm going to define that for you in a few moments, has a soft stool, by the way, he says constipation is the worst thing that can visit a person. That's going to be the root of most illnesses and sicknesses in a person's life. If they do that, they're going to feel robust, even if they eat harmful foods. An idle person who doesn't exercise, neglects the call of nature, and is constipated is going to be in pain and is always going to feel run down. It's 1,000 years ago. It's pretty impressive, right? Even if they eat proper foods. Okay? Okay, so now he talks about how to do this. And he says that when it comes to exercise, you want to start with weak movements and then work your way up. And I've seen quoted in other books of Jewish literature, the Cheshbon HaNefesh talks about in chapter 21, he talks about how in Greece, because they were very into physical health, they would have a person who would carry a calf and then, a short amount of distance, and then he would keep carrying this calf as it grew older. You see? So it starts as a small cow, and then it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the same person would carry it. The idea of incrementally raising the amount of weight and resistance that you have, says the Cheshbon Nefesh, is the best way to go. Okay? That's what he would say. You would always don't keep the same weight that you're lifting, always the same distance or the same speed. You always want to keep increasing the amount of weight that you do or exercise that you do. Okay? All right, so that's the mitzvah to exercise. And by the way, it is a mitzvah to exercise and to walk and take it out. I'm telling you, you should actually have in mind every time you do any form of exercise, whether it's your 10,000 steps a day, although I think they say that's a myth, but it's better than nothing, right? Every time you walk somewhere or run or get on the treadmill or lift weights, you should have in your mind, even for a moment, I'm doing this as a way to take care of my body, this body that Hashem gave me, that I'm going to have the rest of my life. I heard a beautiful analogy for this from one of my friends. He's a doctor. He said to me, I want you to imagine I'm going to give you a gift right now. I'm going to give you a car. Any car you want, you can have. What car would you choose if you could choose any car that you want? I asked this to my wife, and she said a blue one. Okay, that's my wife. All right, I personally, I'd go for a Ferrari, right? I'd go for a Porsche. Oh, I'm not allowed to get one, but I can't afford one. But I'll go for a Porsche. I'll go for a really fancy, nice car. Now, if I told you that you're going to have that car for the rest of your life, so you can choose any car you want, but that's the only car you can have the rest of your life, how well would you treat that car? Would you clean it? Would you wipe it down? Would you make sure to check the oil, right? Or if it's an EV, check the plug, right? You'd make sure you really take care of that car. You, my friends, have been given one body for the rest of your life. Hashem gave you one body. You can't change it. Yes, the cells regenerate, but that's not enough. You've got to take care of your body. It's the one body Hashem gave you to last you your entire life. Therefore, it's a mitzvah every time you wash your body, take care of your body. There's stories of the Gemara of great rabbis. And one of them was going on Erev Shabbat to the bathhouse. And one of his students said, where are you going? I'm going to the bathhouse. He says, shouldn't you be studying Torah? He said, you crazy? I'm doing a mitzvah. This is one of the greatest mitzvah you can do. Take a bath, take care of your body, and clean yourself. Leaving aside the fact that it's a chilul Hashem to walk around smelling. It's a chilul Hashem. to Kiddush Hashem, to dress well and to be clean and to take care of your body in every way, shape, or form. It is a mitzvah. It's not, oh, I got to do it so I can, do mitzvot. It is a mitzvah in and of itself to exercise, to run, to lift weights, yoga, whatever you want to do. They're all the same, just pick one. Okay, let's get to how to eat. Because the Rambam is going to tell you how to eat. Now you're thinking, what's it going to tell me? Take the food and shove it in your mouth, right? That's how you eat. No. First of all, this standing and eating disease that I don't do anymore. At the Kiddush, you see them at the Kiddush, stand and eat. All right, you know the Kiddush. You put your hand near the food, and suddenly you get like a fork stuck in it because, Mrs. Cohen's trying to go for the lachma jin, and she gets your hand instead. Right, everyone turns into complete. I can't do that anymore. I used to, but I can't do that anymore. And you go to Ashkenazi Kiddushim, and they're doing the gefilte fish. Oh my God, what is that? Please. That's a chilul Hashem, right? Or they go for the herring, and the oil's dripping down the head. I don't do that anymore. I'm done. I refuse to do the Ashkenazi food at the Kiddush. I'm done with the herring and the smelly oils and the gefilte fish. Right? When I remember the first time I ate gefilte fish, I'm like, is there a fish swimming through the water with a carrot on its head? Is this even normal? I then found out that actually it's all the terrible stuff from the other fishes that they kind of like stick together, make a patty out of. I cannot do this. This is not a mitzvah. Standing at the Kiddush and stuffing your face with this food, this is not good. You must, or you should, I should say must. Right? And by the way, when you see me standing eating, don't call me out on this. But you're meant to actually sit down when you eat. That's what the Rambam says. And I'm reading the words of the Rambam. He says, Le'olam, k'shiyachal adam yeshev bimkomo, sit down when you eat. I think doctors agree with that. Standing eating is not good. You should sit down when you eat, and you should recline on your, which side? Which side ideally? On your left. I'll give you 50-50 choice. On your left. How do we know that? Because on Pesach, we lean to the left. Now really, the idea of leaning is because we're free people. But lean to the left is because I think there's something to do with the stomach, different versions, or maybe there's a flap in your throat, your airways, whatever it is. But they recommend leaning to the left. So you should actually sit down and lean a bit to the left. Now, it used to be people didn't have chairs. They used to literally lean every time they ate. You'd sit on a cushion, You see those like videos that it's like men sit down and all the servants bring out I want to bring that back, by the way. Anyway, so he says, lean to your left after the meal. And this is something your mothers all told you when you were kids. What should you not do after eating a meal? Swim. Remember that? They would tell you that? He actually said, the Rambam says, after the meal, do not move too much, ride or exert yourself. Don't get overly excited or take a walk until the food has been digested. Now, in medical science, they do say that, I read, because I think all the blood is going into your stomach to help digest the food. And when you exercise, I think the blood is going to your extremities. So there's like a competition going on in your body or something like that. So it's not a good thing to do when you finish it. So sit down and eat and stay seating. And they actually recommend 30 minutes before you swim or do anything else. Okay? People who walk or strain themselves after eating can become seriously ill, says the Rambam. And I believe that's been proven as well. Okay? So that's the Rambam. You should sit and lean and wait. Take your time. Don't just grab the food and throw it in. Okay. I'm just going to cut through to the best parts. How to sleep. Says the Rambam. Lo yashan adam al kol panim. Don't sleep face down or on your back. Says the Rambam. You should sleep on your left side at the beginning of the night or your right side at the end of the night. And if you have financial problems, you'll be tossing and turning, so it works out nicely. Baruch Hashem. All right? Many times I'm like, boom, 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 boom. That's what he says. He says, don't stay on one side. You want to give your organs on each side of the body, no, seriously, the chance to not have too much pressure on them. And therefore, you should try to move around, okay? Do not go to bed shortly after eating. Now, here's a very interesting and important halakha. And actually, the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, brings that there is a machloket between the Rambam, a disagreement to the Rambam and Rav Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, who follows the Rambam on many occasions, how long you should wait after eating and going to bed. The Rambam says you should wait 3 to 4 hours. I believe the Mechaber says 2 to 3. There's a 1 hour difference. I'm not sure why. But one thing is for sure. You should not and the Shulchan Aruch does bring this down, eat and then sleep straight away. You should give your body a chance to digest the food. You shouldn't sleep on your food. That is the halakha of the Rambam, and I know this. I know it's very popular now. Intermittent fasting has become like a very popular thing. By the way, your ancestors all did intermittent fasting because they had no food, right? They didn't have 3 meals a day. Right? Really, you should probably have 2. Some people even have 1 meal a day. That could actually probably be the best thing. I know it's very unusual for us, but 1 meal a day, maybe a little snack when you wake up, and then a bigger meal, and you should try to go long amounts of time without eating. You should try to go to sleep on an empty stomach. And by that, I think most dietitians and nutritionists will tell you that's one of the best things you can do to literally 3 to 4 hours. Right? I know people who wake up in the middle of the night, they go to the kitchen, they start grazing. It's like the worst thing you can do to your body. Okay? So that's the Rambam, 3 to 4 hours. So if you go to bed, we're going to talk about how long you should sleep for, by the way. That's a major area that we're going to see. So how many meals a day? Shulchan Aruch says you should have 2 meals a day. Right. Which ones they are, I'm not too sure, but I do know that it's when you wake up in the morning, one of the most important meals, the Shulchan does say you should have pad b'shachar. The Gemara says, try to have grains or bigger meal in the morning, right? I think, what do they say? You eat like a rich person in the morning, you had this one, like an average person in the afternoon, and like a pauper at night. Those are the way you should eat. We do the opposite, right? We have something small in the morning, and then we eat these massive meals before you go to sleep. It's not good. The Rambam says people have different habits on when they eat. Most eat in the morning and the evening, right? But he says that's the way it should be. Ideally, says the Rambam, in his treatise on asthma, on breathing, he says ideally 1 meal a day. He does not bring that down in the Mishnah Torah. Do not ask me why. I'm not a Rambam expert. That's what he says. Sleep. How long should a person sleep for? So if you ask most people how long they sleep for, they'll say, I go for like 5 hours a night, maybe 6. Let me be very clear with you. In terms of your physical health, maybe just as if not more important than what you eat and how much you eat is how much you sleep. And the Rambam says 1/3 of your night should be sleeping. Or 1/3 of your 24-hour period, actually, which is how many hours? 8. That is the sweet spot. 8 hours of a 24-hour period should be sleeping. Now, I have heard that some people divide up that 8 hours of 6 or 7 at night and then naps during the day. By the way, isn't the best thing to nap? Why is that wasted on babies? Right? Why do I have to talk my kids into napping? I think one of my kids sent me a meme. When I was younger, I always wanted to go to sleep after 9 p.m. because that was my bedtime. Now I'm an adult and realize that's the best time to go to sleep. By the way, when you're a parent, God willing, you'll see B'ezrat Hashem, you're like, how early can I send my kids to sleep before it's child abuse? At some point, it gets earlier and earlier. Hopefully you get full circle. Sleeping is extremely important to your health, says the Rambam, and says modern science. There's no doubt about it. Everyone agrees that people who get definitely less than 5, some even say less than 6, but definitely less than 5 hours a night, you are damaging your health in terrible, terrible ways, as the Rambam says. Okay? The Rambam says the day and night made up of 24 hours. One needs to sleep 1/3 of the time, which is 8 hours. One should sleep towards the end of the night so that you sleep 8 hours and awaken before sunrise. That's how the Rambam defines it. Okay? And that's the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah. Okay, drinking. Yep, you're all in big trouble. The best thing you can drink is Coke Zero. I'm kidding. That's my one weakness. Water. Water, obviously, maybe not so obvious, is the most beneficial beverage for the body, says the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and the Rambam agrees. The Rambam, however, then goes on to a bit of a divergence and talks about drinking water with a little bit of wine added to it. And he says, I'm living in a country, he actually lives in a Muslim country, where it's forbidden to drink wine, but he says wine is the best and healthiest thing you can drink. Don't over drink it, but a little bit of wine mixed in. But the wines we have today are much stronger, I believe, than they used to be. I think so. You want to water down, maybe the other way around. You need to water down the wines, have a little bit, and that's definitely okay, and okay for you to have a little bit of wine. Definitely talks well about that. He says, drink only a small amount of wine mixed with wine during the meal. Once your food's begun to digest, as the Rambam, you can drink all you want. Okay, not wine, that's water. Okay, so that's very, very important. Okay. It is known among doctors, says the Rambam, that the best of all nutrients and nourishing foods is one thing that's prohibited by Islamic law, he says, and that's wine. It's abundantly nourishing, good, thin, rapidly digested. In addition, it assists digestion, expels harmful superfluities, he says, pores for the flesh, and has many, very virtues. As long as you don't drink it, a little bit of wine is acceptable. Okay, then the Rambam says something unbelievable. And this is the source for something that all of you have heard many times from your mothers and grandmothers, and he says the best thing you can eat or drink is the broth of chicken soup, the Rambam. And he says the following. He says that one should always attempt to partake of the meat of chicken or hens. It's a great protein. One should always drink their broth, i.e. soup, because this kind of fowl has the property of improving physical complaints and may even cure leprosy. Didn't know that. Stay away from, listen to this. He wrote this almost 1,000 years ago. Stay away from fowl, birds, that have been fattened by force feeding. Unbelievable. That's what he says. Force feeding birds and each of them is not good for you or the animal. If it's not good for the animal, it ain't good for you. Actually, some of the laws of kashrut, they're not about health, but there are some health benefits that come from eating kosher. Kosher is not for health. Definitely not the reason for the laws of kosher, but when you keep kosher, there are some physical benefits that may come from eating kosher. I'm just differentiating between a reason for a mitzvah and a benefit from a mitzvah. And the two can be mutually exclusive. Fruits. What's the best fruit a person can eat, according to the Rambam? Anybody know? Well, what? Watermelon. I haven't read him talk about water. Maybe he mentions it somewhere in his writings. Apples are definitely good. You know what's even better than apples, according to the Rambam? Almonds. Shkedim. Almonds are amazing. And he talks a lot. He says, do not eat a lot of dried fruit, and certainly do not eat unripe fruit. It is like a sword for the body, says the Rambam. Figs, grapes, almonds are always wholesome, both fresh and dried. So you can get away with a nice dried fig, grape, or almond, which is a raisin basically. Right? Raisins are very, very good for you. You may have as much of them as you need, just don't make them into your regular diet. Okay? We know there's a lot of sugar and a lot of dried fruit, but he seems to make an exception for figs, grapes, and almonds. He loves almonds. And he says, I have a lot more to tell you, but I'll just finish with the guarantee of the Rambam. He says, I guarantee whoever lives by these guidelines will not become sick, but will die of old age. They will never need a doctor. And he's a doctor speaking, right? I mean, there was no insurance in those days, so he probably needed the business, but still, they won't need a doctor. You'll enjoy perfect health, and you'll be in fine shape for your entire life. If you just follow this, he has a lot more, which I didn't mention, but this is the main thrust of the Rambam's writings. These health-preserving habits of eating healthfully, not overeating, drinking water, checking your bowel movements, sleeping at least 8 hours a day, all of these things are going to help you if you're already healthy. But if you're sick, or if you have a disease, or you have followed an unhealthy lifestyle for many years, you have to follow and observe what the medical establishments, as the Rambam, advise you to do. So eating healthy is the first port and call for any doctor that you go and see. One of the first questions they should be asking you is not what the problem is tell me about your physical health and your weight and your waist size, which is probably, according to many people, more indicative of health than actually weight, right? Waist size is like there's a lot of doctors in my family, and one of my doctors, my uncle's actually a psychiatrist, and his son is and they always say waist size is the most important thing to indicate health more than weight, because some people are bigger people, so they have water weight and other stuff. Waist size is really very important. If, however, a person gets sick, it is a mitzvah to see the doctor, but it always starts with good food, exercise, sleep, and not overeating. We'll stop over there. Thank you all very, very much. All right.